I stood at the back of that church in my $15 thrift store dress, watching my son Marcus promise to love and honor his bride, and all I could think was, this wedding cost $80,000, exactly the amount he stole from my retirement account 3 years ago. The same son who told me I was too poor and embarrassing to be invited was now reading vows he probably paid someone to write with my money. 300 guests filled those pews. His colleagues, her family, society people who wouldn't give me a second glance. But Marcus didn't know I was there, hiding behind a stone pillar in the back where the ushers couldn't see me. He thought he'd gotten away with it. He thought blocking my number and changing his locks meant I'd just disappear from his life. He thought wrong. And when that priest opened his mouth to ask if anyone objected to this marriage, my son was about to learn that a mother's love has limits, but a mother's memory doesn't forget a single dollar. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below and hit subscribe because this story is going to take you on a ride you won't forget. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. My name is Dorothy Mitchell. I'm 72 years old, and I need you to understand something before I continue. When your only child steals everything you've worked 40 years to save, you don't just lose money. You lose your future, your dignity, and the version of yourself that believed blood meant something. But standing in that church, watching Marcus adjust his $3,000 tuxedo, I realized I'd lost something else 3 years ago. My voice. Today, I was taking it back. Let me take you back to where this nightmare started. It was a Tuesday morning in March, 3 years before that wedding. I was sitting at my kitchen table with my coffee, the same table where I'd fed Marcus breakfast every morning for 18 years, when my phone rang. It was Sharon from First National Bank, and her voice had that careful tone people use when they're about to ruin your day. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm calling about some unusual activity on your retirement account. Did you authorize a wire transfer of $80,000 yesterday? My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. I'd spent 40 years as a dental hygienist, living in the same modest house, driving the same car for 15 years, eating leftovers, skipping vacations. Every dollar of that $80,000 represented a sacrifice. A dinner I didn't go out for, a dress I didn't buy, a trip I didn't take. And now Sharon was telling me it was gone. There must be a mistake, I told her, my voice shaking. I would never authorize that. I don't even know how to do a wire transfer. Sharon's pause said everything. Mrs. Mitchell, the transfer was authorized using your account access credentials. The money went to an account at Metropolitan Trust Bank. The name on the account is Marcus David Mitchell. My son, my only child. The boy I'd raised alone after his father walked out when he was 2. The man I'd just helped with $5,000 6 months earlier when he said he was having temporary cash flow problems with his consulting business. I hung up and called Marcus immediately. It went straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I called his office. His assistant Brenda said he was in meetings all day and couldn't be disturbed. I knew Brenda's voice well enough to hear the lie. So I got in my 15-year-old Honda and drove to his downtown office, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The whole drive I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe someone hacked my account. Maybe it was identity theft. Maybe Marcus was helping me invest it and forgot to tell me. But when I got to his building, the security guard in the lobby wouldn't let me up. I'm sorry, ma'am, but Mr. Mitchell left instructions that you're not on his visitor list anymore. Not on his visitor list. My own son had banned me from his workplace. I stood there in that marble lobby, surrounded by people in expensive suits rushing past me like I didn't exist. And I felt something crack inside my chest. I drove to his house next, a beautiful brownstone in the historic district that I'd helped him buy by co-signing the mortgage when the bank said he didn't have enough credit history. I rang the doorbell 5 times. No answer. I could see lights on inside. I could hear music playing. I knocked on the door until my knuckles hurt, calling his name. A neighbor came out and asked if I needed help, looking at me like I was some crazy old woman harassing someone. I'm his mother, I said, and even to my own ears it sounded pathetic, like I was trying to prove I had the right to exist. Finally, my phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Short, cold, devastating. Stop harassing me. The money was a loan you promised me years ago. You just don't remember because you're getting old. I'm blocking your number. Don't contact me again. A loan I promised? I read it 3 times, standing on his front porch, trying to understand how my son could type those words. I'd never promised him $80,000. I'd never promised him anything except love and support, which I'd given him every single day of his life. And now he was calling me senile, erasing me from his life with a text message and a blocked number. I went to the police the next day, sat in that gray room at the precinct for 2 hours, telling my story to a detective who looked barely older than Marcus. He took notes, nodded sympathetically, then delivered the blow. Mrs. Mitchell, I understand this is difficult, but technically this isn't theft. Your son had legal access to your account as an authorized user. You added him yourself 2 years ago, remember? I did remember. Marcus had convinced me it was for emergencies, in case something happened to me. He's family, I'd said. Famous last words. But he took everything without permission, I said, hearing the desperation in my own voice. The detective sighed. It's a civil matter, not criminal. You'd need to sue him. Get a lawyer. But I have to warn you, family court judges often see these cases as disputes over informal loans or gifts. Your son's text message about the loan? That's going to be his defense. You'd need to prove he committed fraud, and that's very difficult when he had legitimate access to the account. I couldn't afford a lawyer. I'd just lost my entire retirement. I went home and called every attorney I could find who offered free consultations. They all said the same thing. Possible to win, but expensive to fight, and I'd need at least $15,000 up front. Money I didn't have. Money my son had stolen. I was trapped in a perfect circle of injustice. So I did what I'd done my whole life when things got hard. I kept working. I was supposed to retire that year, but instead I picked up extra shifts at the dental office. Dr. Patterson let me work part-time even though I was past retirement age. For 3 years, I didn't hear from Marcus once. Not on my birthday, not on Christmas, not on Mother's Day. I'd given him life, raised him alone, sacrificed everything for his education, his opportunities, his dreams, and he'd repaid me by stealing my future and erasing me from his present. I sold my car and took the bus. I stopped eating out. I bought clothes at thrift stores. I canceled my cable. Every penny went to rebuilding what he'd taken, but at 72, working part-time, I was only saving about $400 a month. At that rate, I'd be 88 before I had my retirement back. Then 6 months ago, I saw it. I was at the grocery store, reaching for the generic brand cereal because it was 50 cents cheaper, when I glanced at the magazine rack. There was Marcus on the cover of City Business magazine. Young Entrepreneur of the Year, how Marcus Mitchell built $1 million consulting empire. $1 million. I bought the magazine with shaking hands, not caring that it cost $7.99 I couldn't afford. The article was 8 pages long, full of photos of Marcus in designer suits, standing in his expanded office, talking about his self-made success and his vision for growth. Not one mention of where he got his seed money. Not one mention of me. There was a photo of him at a charity gala with his fiancée, Victoria something hyphenated, a blonde woman in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The article mentioned they'd met at his company and were planning a destination wedding celebration. I stared at that photo until the words blurred. My son had become successful on my stolen retirement, and now he was getting married. And I wasn't invited. I didn't even know he was engaged. I did something I'm not proud of. I created a fake Facebook account just to see his life. His profile was public, full of photos I wasn't meant to see. Him and Victoria in Paris. Him accepting business awards. Him at restaurants I'd never been able to afford. And then, 2 months ago, the wedding announcement. Marcus David Mitchell and Victoria Alexandria Ashworth Crane request the honor of your presence at their wedding celebration. The date, the venue, St. Catherine's Cathedral, the most expensive church in the city. The reception at the Grandview Country Club. Black tie, 300 guests. I sat at my kitchen table reading that announcement over and over, and something shifted inside me. For 3 years I'd been the victim in this story. The abandoned mother, the betrayed parent, the foolish woman who trusted her son. But reading about that wedding, seeing him spend money that should have been funding my retirement on a party to show off his fake success, I felt anger replace grief. He'd taken my money. He'd taken my dignity. But he hadn't taken my ability to show up and tell the truth. I started planning. I called the church pretending to be a guest and asked about seating arrangements. I learned the ceremony was open seating, first come, first served. I wouldn't need an invitation to get into the church, just courage to walk through those doors. I bought that $15 dress at Goodwill, gray and plain, the kind of dress an old woman wears when she can't afford anything else. I wanted to look exactly like what I was, a mother who'd been robbed and forgotten. I wanted Marcus to see what his theft had done. The week before the wedding, I barely slept. I rehearsed what I'd say 1,000 times. I imagined his face when he saw me. I wondered if Victoria knew where his seed money really came from, or if she believed his self-made success story. I thought about backing out every single day. What if I was wrong? What if making a scene at his wedding made me the villain? What if no one believed me? But then I'd remember that text message. "You're getting old. Don't contact me again." And I'd remember I had nothing left to lose. The morning of the wedding, I woke up at 5 a.m. I put on that thrift store dress and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked old. I looked poor. I looked exactly like what 3 years of stolen retirement had made me. Good. I took the bus downtown, transferred twice, and arrived at St. Catherine's Cathedral 2 hours before the ceremony. I walked around back and found an unlocked side door that led to a storage area behind the main sanctuary. I could hear the wedding coordinator's voice echoing through the space, directing florists and musicians. I waited in that storage room for 90 minutes, sitting on a box of old hymnals, listening to the church fill with guests. I heard laughter. I heard champagne glasses clinking. I heard someone say Marcus had such an inspiring story of building success from nothing. From nothing. I almost laughed. Through a crack in the door, I watched the guests arrive. Women in designer gowns, men in tuxedos that cost more than my monthly salary. These were Marcus's people now. The society crowd who'd never know what it felt like to choose between medicine and groceries. The music changed. The wedding march began. I slipped out of the storage room and moved to that stone pillar at the back of the church, hidden in shadow. I watched Marcus walk down the aisle with his best man. He looked happy, confident, successful in his expensive tuxedo. Then Victoria appeared in a dress that I'd bet cost $10,000, probably more. She looked like a princess. Marcus looked like a prince. And there I was, Cinderella's mother, watching from the shadows in my 50-ounce dress, waiting for midnight to strike. The ceremony began. The priest talked about love and commitment and honor. Marcus read his vows about being faithful and true. Every word felt like a knife. This man had taken an oath to his mother at birth, a silent promise that came with being given life, and he'd broken it for money. Now he stood there making promises to a woman he'd known 3 years, while the woman who'd known him his whole life hid in the back. The priest smiled at the couple. "If anyone has objections to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace." The color drained from his face. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. And I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I object. I object because this wedding was paid for with money my son stole from his own mother's retirement account." The silence that followed was absolute. 300 people frozen in their seats, mouths open, champagne glasses suspended halfway to lips. The string quartet stopped mid-note. Even the flowers seemed to hold their breath. Marcus stood there in his $3,000 tuxedo, staring at me like I was a ghost, risen from a grave he thought he'd sealed shut 3 years ago. Victoria's face went from bridal glow to pure horror in less than a second. The priest looked between us, completely lost, his prepared speech about holy matrimony dying on his lips. "Mom?" Marcus's voice cracked on the word, like he couldn't believe I was real. Like he couldn't believe I'd actually shown up to his perfect society wedding in my thrift store dress to tell the truth he'd been hiding. His best man, some guy named Trevor I'd seen in his Facebook photos, grabbed his arm and whispered something urgent. But Marcus couldn't look away from me. I saw calculation flash across his face, that same expression he'd had as a teenager when he got caught in a lie and was working out his escape route. "Security!" Victoria hissed, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Someone call security." But we were in a church, not a nightclub. There was no security to call. Just 300 witnesses watching a mother confront her son. I took another step down the aisle, my cheap shoes clicking on marble that probably cost more to install than my entire yearly salary. "Tell them, Marcus," I said, keeping my voice steady, even though my whole body was shaking. "Tell your bride where you got the $80,000 seed money for your business." Marcus's face went through a series of expressions: shock, fear, anger, then finally that practiced charm he'd perfected in the business world. "Mom, you're confused. You're not well. This is exactly what I was worried about." He turned to the crowd, spreading his hands in a gesture of helpless concern. "My mother has been struggling with memory issues. She's convinced herself of things that aren't true. I've tried to get her help, but she refuses treatment." The gasp that went through the church was different now. Sympathetic. They were looking at me with pity, like I was the crazy old lady disrupting her poor son's special day. "I have the bank records," I said, pulling folded papers from the small purse I'd brought. I'd made copies of everything. Spent $47 at FedEx to print them in color. Wire transfer authorization from March 14th, 3 years ago. $80,000 from my retirement account to Marcus David Mitchell's business account. I didn't authorize it. I didn't even know about it until the bank called me. I started walking down the aisle, holding the papers up. People in the front rows leaned forward to look. I saw doubt creeping into some faces. Victoria grabbed Marcus's arm. "What is she talking about? You told me your uncle left you an inheritance. You told me that's where the money came from." Marcus's face went pale again. That was a crack in his story, and everyone heard it. "Victoria, not now," he said through clenched teeth. "We'll talk about this later." But Victoria wasn't letting it go. "Your uncle? The one you said died 5 years ago? That uncle?" Her voice was getting louder. The bride was supposed to be radiant and calm. Instead, she looked like someone who just realized she'd been lied to. An older man stood up from the third row, distinguished-looking in an expensive suit. "Young man, if what your mother is saying is true, that's elder financial abuse. That's a felony in this state." I recognized him from the magazine article. Robert Ashworth Crane, Victoria's father. A real estate mogul worth millions. The kind of man who probably did his homework before letting his daughter marry anyone. "Mr. Ashworth, this is a misunderstanding," Marcus said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "My mother and I had an agreement. She was investing in my business." "An agreement?" I heard my voice rise, felt 3 years of suppressed rage pushing through. "You blocked my number. You banned me from your office. You called me senile when I tried to get my money back. What kind of agreement involves stealing from your own mother and then erasing her from your life?" My hands were shaking so badly the papers rattled. A woman in the front row was crying. Another woman pulled out her phone, probably recording. This wasn't going to stay contained in this church. By tonight, this would be all over social media. Marcus's mother-in-law-to-be, an elegant woman in a lavender dress, stood up next to her husband. "Victoria, sweetheart, come here." Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. Victoria gathered her enormous dress and stepped away from Marcus, moving toward her parents, the bride leaving the groom's side during the ceremony. That's when I knew I'd won something. Even if I never got my money back, I'd planted doubt in his perfect new life. The priest cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should take a brief recess and discuss this in private." "No." Victoria's voice rang out clear and strong. "No private discussions. If this woman is telling the truth, I need to know now. Not in private. Not later. Now." She turned to Marcus, her veil trembling. "The seed money for your business. Where did it really come from?" Marcus looked trapped, surrounded by people who'd believed his self-made success story. "Victoria, you're letting a confused old woman ruin our wedding day. She's been harassing me for years with these delusions." But his voice lacked conviction. He was a man watching his carefully constructed lies crumble in real time. I pulled out my phone, opened my messages, found that text from 3 years ago. This is what my son sent me when I asked for my money back. I read it out loud, every cruel word. Stop harassing me. The money was a loan you promised me years ago. You just don't remember because you're getting old. I'm blocking your number. Don't contact me again. My voice broke on the last words. Does that sound like someone repaying a legitimate investment? Or does it sound like someone covering up theft by calling his mother senile? Victoria's father pulled out his own phone, typing rapidly. Mr. Mitchell, I'm texting my attorney right now. If you defrauded this woman, if you built your business on stolen funds, then every contract you've signed, every deal you've made, is potentially compromised, including the prenuptial agreement you signed with my daughter. That got Marcus's attention. His whole body went rigid. Mr. Ashworth, I assure you this is a family misunderstanding that has nothing to do with my business practices. Family misunderstanding? I couldn't help but laugh, and it came out harsh and bitter. Marcus, I worked 40 years as a dental hygienist. 40 years of early mornings and sore feet and hands that smelled like latex gloves. I raised you alone from age 2. I paid for your college by taking out loans I just finished paying off last year. I co-signed your mortgage because you didn't have enough credit. And you repaid all of that by draining my retirement account and blocking my number. That's not a misunderstanding. That's theft and abandonment wrapped in a bow. The crowd was turning. I could feel it. Whispers rippled through the pews. Some people were openly staring at Marcus with disgust. Others were comforting Victoria, who looked like her perfect wedding day had exploded into a nightmare. Trevor, the best man, actually stepped away from Marcus, creating physical distance. Marcus stood alone at the altar, his carefully constructed image shattering in front of everyone he'd tried to impress. I don't have to listen to this, he said, his voice rising. This is my wedding, my day. You have no right to be here. I have every right, I said, surprised by the strength in my own voice. I'm your mother. I gave you life. I gave you everything I had. And then I gave you $80,000 more without knowing it. So yes, Marcus, I absolutely have the right to stand in this church and tell these people the truth about your self-made success. I turned to address the crowd. How many of you read that City Business Magazine article about Marcus, the young entrepreneur of the year? Did you know his seed money came from his 72-year-old mother's retirement account? Did you know she's been working part-time for 3 years trying to rebuild what he stole? A woman in the 5th row stood up. I know you, she said, pointing at me. You're Dorothy Mitchell. You cleaned my teeth for 20 years at Dr. Patterson's office. You always talked about how proud you were of your son. She turned to Marcus. She showed me your college graduation photos. She told me you were doing so well in consulting. She never once said anything bad about you, even when… She stopped, her hand going to her mouth. Oh my God. Even when you were robbing her, she was still bragging about you to strangers. That hit me harder than anything else, because it was true. Even after Marcus stole from me, even after he blocked my number, I'd kept up the pretense with patients and neighbors that my son was successful and we were close. I'd protected his reputation while he was destroying mine. Why? Because that's what mothers do. We protect our children even when they don't deserve it, even when they're hurting us. Even when they've become strangers wearing our children's faces. Natural pause, soft CTA. I need to take a breath here, just like I did in that church. What happened next changed everything. But before I tell you, I need to know, are you still with me? Drop a comment and let me know what you're feeling right now. Because trust me, this story is about to take a turn I never saw coming. Marcus's face had gone from pale to red, anger replacing shock. You want to do this here? Fine. Yes, I took the money. But you want to know the truth, Mom? You owed me that money. You owed me for 18 years of living in that tiny house because you were too afraid to take risks. You owed me for every time I was embarrassed to bring friends home because we were poor. You owed me for all the opportunities I missed because you couldn't afford them. That money wasn't theft. It was compensation for the childhood you gave me. The church went completely silent. Even the people who'd been whispering stopped. Everyone was staring at Marcus in horror. He'd just said the quiet part out loud, that he believed his mother's sacrifices entitled him to steal from her. Victoria took 3 steps back, her hand over her mouth. Marcus, she whispered. What are you saying? But he was on a roll now. Years of resentment pouring out. I built something from nothing. Well, from $80,000. And I paid you back in other ways, Mom. I got successful. I made something of myself. Isn't that what you always wanted? What I wanted, I said, my voice shaking with rage now, was for my son to be a good man. I didn't care if you were rich or poor. I just wanted you to have integrity, to be honest, to treat people with respect, especially your own mother. But instead, you became the kind of man who steals from old women and then justifies it by blaming them for not being rich enough when you were growing up. I turned to Victoria. Sweetheart, I don't know you. But I'm going to tell you something woman to woman. If a man can do this to his own mother, there's no limit to what he can do to you. Victoria's mother stood up, her face hard. The wedding is off. She said it with finality. No room for discussion. Victoria, get your things. We're leaving. Victoria looked at Marcus, tears streaming down her face, mascara running. Tell me she's lying. Tell me you didn't really steal from your own mother and then abandon her. Marcus opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He'd used up all his lies. His silence was the loudest confession in that church. I need to hear you say it, Victoria said. Did you take $80,000 from your mother's retirement account without permission? Marcus's jaw clenched. I took money that should have been mine anyway. Everything she only had because she was my mother. I just collected early. That was it. The final nail. Victoria pulled off her engagement ring, a massive diamond that probably cost more than my house, and threw it at his feet. It bounced once, twice, then rolled down the altar steps. No one moved to pick it up. You're a thief and a liar, Victoria said, her voice breaking. And I almost married you. I almost had children with you. Thank God your mother showed up when she did. She gathered her enormous dress and walked down the altar steps, past me, down the center aisle. Her parents followed. Then her bridesmaids. Then guests started standing up and leaving, one by one, then in groups. The church was emptying out. Marcus stood there watching his wedding, his reputation, his carefully built life walk out those doors. The priest touched Marcus's arm gently. Son, I think you need to leave now. Marcus looked at him wildly. This is my wedding. I paid for this church. I paid for everything. The priest's expression was kind but firm. Payment doesn't make something yours when it's built on sin. Go home. Think about what you've done. Pray for forgiveness. And then make it right. Marcus's best man was already gone, I noticed. Slipped out during the chaos. Smart man. Marcus turned to me, and for a second I saw the little boy he used to be. The one who'd climb into my bed during thunderstorms. The one who'd made me cards for Mother's Day out of construction paper. Then his face hardened again. Are you happy now, Mom? You destroyed my wedding. You humiliated me in front of everyone I know. Was it worth it? I looked at my son, this stranger in an expensive tuxedo, and felt something break free inside my chest. You destroyed yourself, Marcus. I just told the truth. And yes, it was worth it. He left then, practically running down the center aisle, his shoes echoing in the nearly empty church. I stood there alone at the altar, in my 15 dress, surrounded by abandoned flowers and discarded wedding programs. I'd done it. I'd told the truth. I'd objected to his perfect wedding and exposed his lies, but I didn't feel victorious. I just felt tired and sad and more alone than ever. I'd gotten my revenge, but revenge doesn't fill the hole where your child used to be. Mrs. Mitchell? A voice behind me. I turned. Victoria's father, Mr. Ashworth, was walking back up the aisle. I wanted to thank you for having the courage to speak up. My daughter deserves better than a man like that. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Also, he continued, I'd like you to come to my office Monday morning. I have some questions about your son's business practices. If he defrauded you, he may have defrauded others. I'd like to help you explore your legal options. I can't afford a lawyer, I said quietly. I told you, he took my retirement. Mr. Ashworth smiled. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm offering you my services pro bono. No man should be able to steal from his mother and walk away. Besides, he pulled out a business card. I have a feeling once we start digging, we're going to find that $80,000 wasn't the only questionable transaction in his business history. Men like your son, they don't stop at one crime. They just get better at hiding them. Natural pause. Soft CTA. I took that business card with shaking hands, not knowing that this moment would lead to everything that came next. Sometimes justice doesn't come from courtrooms. Sometimes it comes from unexpected allies. Stay with me, because what I discovered in the following weeks was bigger than I ever imagined. I went home that afternoon on the bus, still in my thrift store dress, clutching Mr. Ashworth's business card. People stared at me. An old woman in formal wear on public transportation on a Saturday afternoon. If only they knew I'd just blown up my son's wedding and possibly his entire life. My phone started ringing around 6 p.m. Numbers I didn't recognize. I let them all go to voicemail. Later, I'd find out it was reporters. Someone at the wedding had recorded my confrontation with Marcus. By Sunday morning, mother objects at son's wedding, accuses him of elder theft, was trending on social media. The video was everywhere. TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Millions of views. Thousands of comments. That son deserves prison. This brave mother is a hero. Why isn't he arrested yet? I didn't know how to process becoming an overnight internet sensation at 72. My neighbor Aurora knocked on my door Sunday evening with a casserole and her iPad. "Dorothy, you're famous," she said, showing me the screen. There I was, frozen mid-speech in my $15 dress, pointing at Marcus. The caption? "When Mama comes to collect." It had 4.7 million views. Monday morning, I put on my best outfit, a navy pantsuit I'd bought for job interviews back in the 90s, and took the bus to Mr. Ashworth's office downtown. His building was one of those glass towers where the doorman looked at me suspiciously until I showed him my appointment confirmation. Mr. Ashworth's office was on the 30th floor with a view of the entire city. His assistant, a young woman named Jennifer, brought me coffee in a real china cup and told me she'd watched the wedding video 5 times. "You're my hero," she whispered. Mr. Ashworth came in with 2 other lawyers, a woman named Patricia and a younger man named David. They spread papers across a massive conference table and started asking questions. How exactly had Marcus gotten access to my account? When had I noticed the money was gone? What steps had I taken? I told them everything, showed them my copies of the bank records, the text message, the police report. Patricia took notes on a laptop, her fingers flying. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said finally, "I think we have enough for a civil suit, but I want to go deeper. David, start pulling Marcus's business records. I want to see every transaction for the past 3 years." It took them 2 weeks. 2 weeks of diving into Marcus's finances while I went back to my part-time job at the dental office, trying to ignore the fact that patients kept recognizing me from the viral video. Some wanted to high-five me. Others asked for selfies. Dr. Patterson thought it was hilarious. "Dorothy, you're the most famous dental hygienist in America," he said. "We should put your picture on the website." I didn't feel famous. I felt exposed, like everyone could see the family shame I'd tried to hide for 3 years. Then Patricia called. "Mrs. Mitchell, you need to come back to the office. We found something." Her voice had an edge to it, excitement mixed with anger. I took the next bus downtown, my hands sweating the entire ride. What had they found? When I got to the conference room, the table was covered in spreadsheets and documents. David looked like he hadn't slept. Patricia was pacing. Mr. Ashworth sat at the head of the table with an expression I couldn't read. "Your son didn't just steal from you," Patricia said without preamble. "He's been running a scheme for 3 years. The $80,000 he took from you was just the beginning. He's taken money from at least 6 other people, small business owners who hired him as a consultant. He'd convince them to give him access to their accounts to streamline operations. Then he'd make unauthorized transfers to shell companies he controlled. We found $340,000 in fraudulent transactions. Your money was seed money for a criminal enterprise." The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the table. 6 other people? My voice came out as a whisper. 6 families he did this to? David nodded. "We've identified 5 of them. One is a 68-year-old man who lost his entire savings. $65,000. Another is a woman who lost her small business. Marcus would target people who trusted him, gain access to their finances, then steal systematically over several months. He's not just a bad son, Mrs. Mitchell. He's a con artist. "We're filing criminal charges," Mr. Ashworth said. "Federal wire fraud, elder financial abuse, identity theft. With this much evidence, the district attorney will have to prosecute. Your son is looking at serious prison time." Prison. My son in prison. I'd wanted justice, wanted him to face consequences, but hearing it spelled out like this made my stomach turn. "What happens now?" I asked. Patricia slid a folder across the table. "Now we go public with everything we found. And Mrs. Mitchell, I hope you're ready for this, because the media attention from the wedding video was nothing compared to what's coming." She was right. When the story broke, viral wedding objection leads to discovery of multi-victim fraud scheme, it exploded. Network news, national newspapers. I did 3 TV interviews in 1 week, sitting in studios with professional makeup artists making me look presentable while I told my story over and over. The other victims started coming forward. I met Richard, the 68-year-old who'd lost his savings. I met Maria, whose restaurant closed because Marcus had drained her accounts. We became a strange sort of support group, 6 people bound together by the same betrayal. The FBI got involved. That's when I knew it was real. Serious. No going back. 2 agents came to my house, a man and woman in dark suits, asking questions about Marcus's childhood, his behavior, his patterns. "We believe your son is a sociopath," the female agent, Agent Chen, told me. "People like him view others as tools, even family, especially family, because family is easier to manipulate. They trust you. A sociopath." My baby was a sociopath. How had I missed the signs? But here's the thing I haven't told you yet. The thing that makes this whole story even more complicated. 3 days after the FBI interview, I got a letter. Handwritten. No return address. My name and address written in Marcus's distinctive handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a check for $80,000 and a single sentence. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry for everything." The check was real. I verified it with the bank. Marcus had returned my money, all of it, but he hadn't returned anyone else's. That check sat on my kitchen table for 2 days while I tried to figure out what it meant. Was it genuine remorse? Or was it a legal strategy, trying to reduce his charges by showing he'd made restitution to at least 1 victim? Agent Chen called and told me not to cash it yet. "It could be evidence," she said. And frankly, Mrs. Mitchell, accepting money from him before trial could complicate the prosecution. So I stared at that check, $80,000 with my name on it, representing 3 years of stolen retirement, and I couldn't touch it. The preliminary hearing was set for 6 weeks after the wedding that never was. I had to testify, had to sit in that courtroom and look at Marcus across the room while a prosecutor asked me to describe how my son had stolen from me. Marcus wore a gray suit, not the expensive ones from his successful days. He'd lost weight. His lawyer was a public defender because his assets had been frozen. When our eyes met, he looked away first. The judge set bail at $500,000. Marcus couldn't pay it. He went to county jail to await trial. Victoria came to see me one afternoon, about a month after the wedding. She looked different without the elaborate hair and makeup. Younger, sadder. "I wanted to thank you," she said, sitting in my tiny living room drinking the cheap tea I could afford. "If you hadn't shown up, I'd be married to him now. I'd be legally bound to a criminal." She paused. "I loved him, you know. Or I loved who I thought he was. The self-made success story. The ambitious entrepreneur. None of it was real." I patted her hand. "I loved him too. I loved him for 45 years. And none of that was real either." She asked me something then that I hadn't expected. "Do you think he ever loved you? Or was it always manipulation?" I'd been asking myself that same question since the wedding. Were there any real moments in those 45 years? When he'd hug me after school, when he'd say, "Love you, Mom," before hanging up the phone, when he'd smile at me across the dinner table. Was any of it genuine? Or was I just a mark from birth, a resource to be exploited when needed. I don't know, I told Victoria honestly. And that might be the hardest part, not knowing if any of it was real. The trial date was set for 3 months out. In the meantime, I had to decide what to do with that check. Mr. Ashworth advised me to cash it, put it back in my retirement account, start rebuilding. You deserve that money, Dorothy. You earned it over 40 years. Don't let pride or principle make you suffer any longer. But Agent Chen wanted me to hold it as evidence. It shows consciousness of guilt, she explained. Him returning the money to his mother, but no one else demonstrates he knows he's a criminal and is trying to buy his way out of at least one charge. I did something that surprised everyone, including myself. I cashed the check, put $40,000 in my retirement account, and split the other $40,000 among the other 5 victims Marcus had defrauded. They hadn't gotten their money back. The shell companies were empty. Marcus had spent it all maintaining his lifestyle, his fake success, his expensive tastes. So I gave them what I could. It wasn't all they'd lost, but it was something. Mr. Ashworth thought I was crazy. Dorothy, that's your money. You don't owe them anything. But I did owe them something. I owed them recognition that we were all Marcus's victims, that his betrayal of me had funded his betrayal of them, that my retirement money had been the seed money for their destruction. Richard, the 68-year-old who'd lost his savings, cried when I handed him the check for $8,000. Why would you do this? He asked. Because, I said, I'm trying to be the person I raised my son to be, and he should have been the kind of man who made this right for all of you, not just his mother. The trial started on a Tuesday in October, 6 months after the wedding that never was. The courtroom was packed, media in the back rows, the other victims in the gallery. Victoria came, sitting with her parents. I sat in the front row, right behind the prosecution table, so Marcus would have to see me every time he looked up. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Elaine Morrison, laid out the case methodically. Bank records, emails, recorded phone calls where Marcus had lied to clients. It took 3 days just to present the evidence. Then it was time for victim testimony. I went first. Elaine Morrison asked me to describe my relationship with Marcus before the theft. I talked about raising him alone, about scraped knees and parent-teacher conferences, about working double shifts to pay for his college, about being proud when he started his consulting business. Then she asked me to describe the day I found out about the theft. I told the truth, all of it. When I finished, I saw 2 jurors crying. Marcus kept his eyes on the table in front of him. The defense tried to paint me as a vindictive mother, angry that her son had become successful without her. His lawyer, Mr. Brennan, asked me if I'd ever told Marcus he could use my money if he needed it. Never, I said firmly. Did you ever give him permission to access your accounts? I added him as an authorized user for emergencies, not for him to drain them. But you can't prove he didn't have your verbal permission. I can prove he blocked my number and called me senile when I asked for it back. That's not how someone acts when they have permission. The trial lasted 2 weeks, 14 days of evidence, testimony, expert witnesses on financial fraud, psychologists discussing manipulation tactics. Marcus never testified. His lawyer advised against it, probably knowing the prosecution would destroy him on cross-examination. On the final day, both sides gave closing arguments. The defense argued reasonable doubt, claimed these were business loans that had gone bad, insisted Marcus had always planned to pay everyone back. The prosecution called it what it was: a deliberate, calculated, multi-victim fraud scheme executed by a man who saw people as resources to be exploited. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. I sat in the hallway outside the courtroom with the other victims, drinking bad coffee from a vending machine, waiting. When the bailiff finally came out and said they'd reached a verdict, my heart started pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. We filed back into the courtroom. Marcus was brought in from the holding cell where he'd been waiting. He looked thin, exhausted, defeated. The jury foreman stood up, a middle-aged man in a plaid shirt. On the count of wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of elder financial abuse, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of identity theft, guilty. Guilty on all 17 counts. The sentencing hearing was set for 3 weeks later. Maximum possible sentence, 25 years in federal prison. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt empty. This was my son, my baby, and he was going to prison for stealing from his own mother and 5 other people who'd trusted him. Where had I gone wrong? What had I missed in those early years? Agent Chen told me later that I couldn't have known, that sociopaths are experts at hiding who they really are. But I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, somehow, I'd failed him. The sentencing hearing was brief. Judge Morrison listened to victim impact statements. Richard talked about losing his retirement and having to go back to work at 70. Maria talked about her restaurant closing and declaring bankruptcy. I talked about working 3 extra years to rebuild my savings, about the betrayal that hurt worse than the theft, about losing my only child to his own greed. Then Marcus was given a chance to speak. He stood up, looked at the judge, and said, "I'm sorry for what I've done. I'm sorry to my mother most of all. I threw away the most important relationship in my life for money, and I'll regret that until the day I die." Judge Morrison was not moved. "Mr. Mitchell, you systematically defrauded 6 people, including your own elderly mother, over a period of 3 years. You showed no remorse until you were caught. You returned money to your mother only after your crimes became public, and even then, you didn't make restitution to your other victims. This court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. You will also be required to make full restitution to all victims." 12 years. Marcus would be 48 when he got out. I would be 84 if I lived that long. They led him away in handcuffs. He looked back once, caught my eye. I couldn't read his expression. Remorse? Anger? Relief that it was finally over? I'll never know. That was the last time I saw my son in person. He's serving his sentence now at a federal prison 6 hours away. I haven't visited. I'm not sure I ever will. Some of the other victims asked me if I'd forgive him, if I'd write him letters, maintain the relationship. And the truth is, I don't know. How do you forgive someone who looked at you and saw only a resource? How do you maintain a relationship with someone who erased you from their life and only remembered you existed when they needed money or when they got caught? But standing outside that courthouse after sentencing, surrounded by the other victims who'd become my strange chosen family, I realized something. I'd gotten more than justice. I'd gotten my voice back. For 3 years, I'd been silent, ashamed, hiding my family's dysfunction from the world. Then I'd stood up in that church and told the truth, and that truth had avalanched into federal charges and prison time and recovered money for 5 other families. One voice, one objection, one moment of courage had changed everything. Mr. Ashworth walked me to my bus stop that day. He'd become a friend over these months, this wealthy real estate mogul and this part-time dental hygienist bonded by a shared mission of justice. "What will you do now, Dorothy?" he asked. I thought about that question. My retirement account was rebuilt. I'd turned 72. I could actually retire now, live on my savings like I'd planned before Marcus stole it. I think, I said slowly, I'm going to start speaking. To groups, organizations, anyone who'll listen. About elder financial abuse. About recognizing the signs. About having the courage to speak up even when it's family. And that's exactly what I did. That's what I'm still doing. I give talks at senior centers, at churches, at community groups. I tell my story, the theft, the betrayal, the wedding objection, the trial. And after every talk, at least one person comes up to me and whispers that it's happening to them too. A son who borrowed money and never paid it back. A daughter with access to accounts who's been making small withdrawals. A grandchild who promised to invest their savings. Elder financial abuse is an epidemic, and most victims never report it because of shame or love or both. I'm not that victim anymore. I'm a survivor. And more than that, I'm a voice for others who can't speak up yet. The viral video of me objecting at Marcus's wedding has been viewed over 30 million times now. People recognize me on the bus, in the grocery store, at the bank. They call me that brave mother, or the wedding objection lady. But I'm not brave. I'm just a woman who got tired of being invisible. who decided that truth mattered more than keeping family secrets, who learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to let them destroy themselves and others without consequences. So yes, I objected at my son's wedding, and I'd do it again. But here's what I haven't told you yet. The part of this story that keeps me awake some nights, that makes me question everything I thought I knew about justice and motherhood and forgiveness. 2 years after Marcus went to prison, I got another letter. This one came through Mr. Ashworth's office because Marcus didn't have my current address. I'd moved to a smaller apartment to save money and never told him where. The envelope was thin, just 2 pages, and when I unfolded them, I saw Marcus's handwriting had changed. It was smaller now, more cramped, like prison had compressed even the way he formed letters. "Mom," it began, "I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to believe what I'm about to tell you. But I need to say it anyway, because I'm running out of time to be honest about anything." My hands started shaking. Running out of time? Was he sick? Dying? Part of me, that stubborn mother part that never completely dies, felt a flash of panic. I've been in therapy here, mandatory at first, then voluntary because I finally wanted to understand what's wrong with me. The therapist says I have antisocial personality disorder, a sociopath like the FBI agent told you. But here's the thing, Mom. Knowing what I am doesn't change what I did. It just explains it. He wrote about his childhood, about memories I'd forgotten or never knew affected him, about being 6 years old and hearing other kids talk about their fathers, about being 10 and realizing we'd never have the kind of house his friends lived in, about being 15 and feeling ashamed when dates picked him up at our small house. "I know you sacrificed everything for me," he wrote. "I know you worked yourself to exhaustion. But I grew up angry at you for not being enough, for not giving me the life I thought I deserved. That anger twisted into something dark. It made me feel entitled to take what I wanted because I'd been deprived as a child. I'm not asking you to excuse it. I'm just trying to explain how a child's resentment can poison everything." The second page was harder to read. "I think about what I did every single day. I stole your retirement. I blocked your number. I called you senile to cover my crimes. I abandoned you when you needed me most. And then I stole from 5 other people, ruined their lives, destroyed families just like I destroyed ours." The therapist asks me if I feel remorse or if I just regret getting caught. Honest answer? I don't know anymore. I know I should feel remorse. I know what I did was evil. But there's something broken in me, Mom. Something that's always been broken. And I'm terrified that even understanding it doesn't mean I can fix it. He ended with this. "I have stage 3 colon cancer. They found it 6 months ago. With treatment, I might have 2 years. Without it, maybe 1. I'm doing the treatment because I'm a coward. Because even now I'm trying to steal more time. I'm not asking you to visit. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking you to know that in whatever broken way I'm capable of love, I loved you. I love you. And I'm sorry I was the son who destroyed you instead of honoring you. If there's a hell, I'll see you never. Because you're going to heaven, Mom. And I'm going exactly where I deserve to go." I sat in my small apartment with that letter in my lap for 3 hours, not moving, barely breathing. My son was dying. My son, the criminal, the con artist, the sociopath who'd stolen from his own mother. He was dying, and he'd written to tell me, not to ask for anything, but just to let me know. What was I supposed to feel? Relief? Grief? Some twisted combination of both? I called Mr. Ashworth. "He's manipulating you," he said immediately. "Even now, he's manipulating you. The cancer might be real, but the letter is designed to make you feel guilty, to make you come see him, to give him one final chance to play the victim." But I called the prison anyway. Spoke to the warden. Confirmed that yes, Marcus Mitchell had stage 3 colon cancer, was undergoing chemotherapy, prognosis uncertain. It was real. My son was dying in prison, and I was the one who'd put him there. No, I corrected myself. He had put himself there by his choices, his crimes, his systematic destruction of everyone who trusted him. I'd just been the catalyst that exposed the truth. Still, Knowing something intellectually doesn't stop your heart from breaking. I'd carried this child for 9 months. I'd nursed him, raised him, loved him for 45 years. And now he was dying, and I hadn't seen him in 2 years. I talked to my therapist about it. Yes, I'd started seeing a therapist after the trial. Dr. Sarah Chen, a woman in her 50s who specialized in family trauma. "Dorothy," she said gently, "you need to decide what you need, not what he needs. If seeing him will give you closure, go. If it will reopen wounds that have finally started to heal, don't go. There's no wrong answer here except doing something that hurts you because you think you're supposed to." I thought about it for 3 weeks. Pro and con lists, sleepless nights, conversations with the other victims, with Aurora, with Victoria, who'd stayed in touch and become an unexpected friend. Finally, I decided. I would go see him once. Not for him, but for me. Because I needed to look at my son one more time and understand how the sweet boy I'd raised had become the monster who'd destroyed so many lives. I needed to see if there was any remorse in his eyes, or if the letter had been another manipulation. I needed closure, whatever that meant. Mr. Ashworth tried to talk me out of it. The other victims thought I was crazy, but Dr. Chen said, "Sometimes the only way to close a door is to walk through it one last time." So I made the appointment. 6-hour bus ride to the federal prison, visitor badge, metal detector, waiting room that smelled like disinfectant and desperation. They brought Marcus into the visiting room in a wheelchair. I almost didn't recognize him. He'd lost at least 60 pounds. His hair was gone from the chemo. His skin had a gray tinge that made him look decades older than his 42 years. But his eyes were the same. My father's brown eyes. The eyes I'd looked into every day of his childhood. We sat across from each other at a scarred metal table bolted to the floor, a guard standing 10 feet away. For a full minute, neither of us spoke. "What do you say to your dying son who destroyed your life?" "You came," he said finally. His voice was hoarse, weak. "I didn't think you would. I didn't think I would either," I wanted to say, but I just nodded. "I got your letter." Marcus's hands were shaking on the table. I noticed an IV port in his left arm, probably for chemo. Everything I wrote was true. The cancer, the therapy, the apology, all of it. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation, the smooth charm he'd used to con so many people. But all I saw was exhaustion, pain, maybe even genuine remorse, though I'd learned not to trust my ability to read this man. "Why did you do it?" I asked, the question I'd been carrying for 4 years. Not just steal from me, but from everyone. Why? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "The therapist would say it's because I'm a sociopath who lacks empathy and impulse control. That's the clinical answer. The real answer? I wanted to be someone important, someone successful, someone people respected. And I didn't care who I hurt to get there. I saw people as tools, resources, means to an end. Even you. Especially you, because you were the easiest target. You loved me unconditionally, which meant you'd forgive anything. Until you didn't." "I loved the child you were," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I don't know if I ever really knew the man you became." Marcus nodded slowly. "I don't know if I ever really knew him either. I was playing a role my whole life, Mom. The good son, the successful businessman, the perfect fiancé. All of it was an act. The only time I've been real was in that church when you called me out and I exploded. That anger, that resentment, that entitlement, that was the real me. Everything else was performance." We sat in silence again. The guard shifted his weight, bored. Another inmate 2 tables over was crying with his visitor. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. "Are you afraid?" I asked. "Of dying?" Marcus looked at his hands. "Every single day. Not of death itself, but of dying as this person. Of the only legacy I leave being the pain I caused. You, the other victims, Victoria, everyone who believed my lies. That's all I'll be remembered for. The con artist who stole from his own mother. That's my epitaph. Good, part of me thought. You deserve to be remembered that way. But another part, that stubborn mother part, ached for him. I forgive you, I heard myself say. The words surprised me as much as they surprised him. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. You don't have to say that, Mom. I know I don't deserve it. I shook my head. I'm not saying it for you. I'm saying it for me. Because carrying hatred and anger is exhausting, Marcus. It's been poisoning me for 4 years. I forgive you not because what you did is forgivable, but because I need to let go of it. I need to stop letting your choices control my peace. It was true. Sitting there looking at my dying son, I felt something release in my chest. Not love, not anymore, but not hatred either. Just a sad acceptance of reality. Will you come back? Marcus asked as I stood to leave. Our 30-minute visit was almost up. I looked at him. Really looked at him. Maybe for the last time. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe? Maybe not. But Marcus, I want you to know something. I did my best raising you. I wasn't perfect, but I loved you with everything I had. What you became, the choices you made, those weren't my fault. And they weren't because you grew up poor. Plenty of people grow up with less and become good people. You chose this path. And now you have to live with it, for whatever time you have left. He nodded, tears streaming down his gaunt face. I know it was my choice. And Mom? I paused at the door. Thank you for coming. Even if you never come back, thank you for this. I didn't respond. I just walked out, past the guard, through the security checkpoint, into the parking lot where the bus would take me back to my real life. I cried on that bus ride home, but they weren't the tears I expected. They weren't grief for my son, or pain from old wounds. They were tears of release, of letting go, of finally accepting that some things can't be fixed or explained or resolved. Sometimes you just have to survive them. I didn't visit Marcus again. 6 months later, I got a call from the prison. He died the night before, peacefully in the prison hospital. They asked if I wanted to claim his body. I said yes. I gave him a small funeral, just me, Mr. Ashworth, Dr. Chen, and Aurora. No one else came. Victoria sent flowers but didn't attend, which I understood. We buried him next to his father, the man who'd abandoned us both when Marcus was 2. Maybe they'd understand each other, those 2 men who'd chosen selfishness over family. I didn't cry at his funeral. I'd already done my crying. This was just the final administrative task of motherhood, disposing of your child's body. But here's what happened that changed everything. A week after the funeral, I got a package from Marcus's prison property. Inside was a notebook, the kind with a black and white marbled cover that kids use in school. The first page had a note from a prison counselor. Mrs. Mitchell, Marcus asked me to send this to you after his death. He'd been working on it for months. I haven't read it, but he said it was important you receive it. The notebook was full of Marcus's handwriting, page after page, front and back. At the top of the first page, a true accounting of my crimes and their victims. I spent 3 days reading that notebook. Marcus had documented everything. Every person he'd stolen from, every lie he'd told, every manipulation he'd executed. But more than that, he'd written about the victims as people. Maria's restaurant that had been her dream since childhood. Richard, who'd saved for 40 years to retire at 65. A woman named Jennifer I'd never met who'd lost her daughter's college fund. He'd written about how he'd researched them, found their vulnerabilities, exploited their trust. And he'd written about the impact, the marriages that ended, the bankruptcies, the suicides attempts, the destroyed families. It was detailed, meticulous, and utterly damning. The last page had instructions. Mom, I've documented everything the FBI might have missed. There are 3 victims they never found because I used different methods. Their information is here. Please give this to the authorities. Let them recover what they can. Let justice be complete. It won't undo what I did, but maybe it will help someone. And maybe, in some small way, it will prove that at the end, I chose truth over self-preservation. It's the only good thing I ever did. Please let it count for something. I called Mr. Ashworth immediately. We took the notebook to the FBI. Agent Chen was still there, older now, close to retirement. She read it with increasing shock. Mrs. Mitchell, she said when she'd finished, this is incredible. With this information, we can pursue 3 more cases. We can potentially recover another $85,000 for victims we didn't even know existed. The FBI investigation took 6 months. They found the 3 additional victims: an elderly couple who'd lost their home down payment, a single father who'd lost his business, a widow who'd lost her late husband's life insurance. All of them had been too ashamed or confused to report the crime, hadn't even realized they'd been conned until the FBI showed up with Marcus's notebook. Between frozen accounts and seizures, they recovered $63,000 of the $85,000 stolen. I decided to do something with my share of Marcus's remaining estate, about $12,000 after legal fees and debts. I combined it with some of my rebuilt retirement savings and established the Marcus Mitchell Memorial Fund for Elder Financial Abuse Prevention. Yes, I named it after him. Not to honor him, but to ensure his crimes would do some good. The fund provides free legal services to elder abuse victims who can't afford lawyers. It's helped 17 families so far. I run it with help from the other original victims. We've become a strange family, bound by shared trauma and shared purpose. Victoria got married last year, to a genuinely good man, a high school teacher named David who makes her laugh and treats her with respect. She invited me to the wedding. I said yes, though I admit walking into another wedding gave me flashbacks to that day 4 years earlier. But this wedding was different. Simple, intimate, full of real love instead of performance. When Victoria walked down the aisle and saw me in the 3rd row, she smiled. During the reception, she came over to my table. "Thank you," she said, "for saving me from making the biggest mistake of my life." I hugged her. "Thank you for giving me a second daughter." I'm 76 now. 4 years have passed since I stood up in that church and objected to Marcus's wedding. 4 years since I stopped being a silent victim and became a voice for others. I still work part-time at Dr. Patterson's office because I like the routine and the patients. But I also travel around the country giving talks about elder financial abuse. I've spoken to over 10,000 people. I've been featured on 60 Minutes and NPR. I wrote a book about my experience that became a modest bestseller. The royalties go to the fund. People ask me all the time if I regret it, if I wish I'd handled things differently, stayed silent, not made that scene at the wedding. The answer is complicated. I regret that my son became a criminal. I regret that he died young and in pain. I regret that I'll never have grandchildren. Never have that traditional happy ending where family heals and forgives and moves forward together. But do I regret standing up and telling the truth? Never. Not for 1 second. Because that moment of courage, that decision to stop protecting someone who didn't deserve protection, saved 5 other families from continued theft. It exposed a criminal enterprise. It led to justice. The other victims and I get together once a month for dinner. We've become each other's chosen family. Richard brings his famous potato salad. Maria teaches us Spanish phrases. Jennifer shares photos of her daughter who's in college now, funded by the recovered money. We laugh about stupid things and support each other through hard things. We're the family that Marcus's crimes accidentally created. Sometimes I think about what Dr. Chen told me once. Trauma either destroys you or transforms you. You chose transformation. I chose survival. I chose voice. I chose truth. And those choices made all the difference. Sometimes late at night, I think about that moment in the church, standing at the back in my $15 dress, watching my son make promises he didn't understand to a woman who didn't know him. The fear I felt stepping out from behind that pillar. The way my voice shook when I said, "I object." The looks on everyone's faces. The avalanche that one moment created. If I could go back and do it differently, would I? Would I stay silent? Let the wedding happen? Protect my son from consequences one more time? Not a chance. Because standing up that day wasn't just about stopping a wedding. It was about stopping a pattern. It was about saying no more, not one more person, not one more lie, not one more dollar stolen. My son stole my retirement and blocked my number. He abandoned me when I needed him most. He built a criminal empire on my savings. And when I discovered it, when I had the chance to expose him or stay silent, I chose truth. I chose justice. I chose myself for the first time in 72 years. And that choice, painful as it was, set me free. Marcus went to prison. He died there. But I lived. I survived. And I used my voice to help others survive too. That's my legacy. Not the money he stole or the family he destroyed, but the families we saved and the truth we told. I keep Marcus's last letter in my dresser drawer. Sometimes I take it out and read it, trying to find the son I loved in the words of the criminal he became. I don't know if his remorse was real. I don't know if sociopaths can truly feel regret, or if they just learn to perform it convincingly. I don't know if he died in peace or in terror, and I've learned to accept that I'll never know. Some questions don't have answers. Some relationships don't have closure. Some pain doesn't ever completely heal. And that's okay. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting or excusing or pretending it didn't hurt. Healing means building a life that matters despite the pain. So that's my story. The whole truth of it. My son stole from me. I stood up at his wedding and exposed him. He went to prison. He died there. And I survived to tell this story to you and 10,000 others. I survived to build something good from something terrible. I survived to be a voice for the voiceless. And if there's one thing I want you to take from this story, it's this. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. And if someone is hurting you, even if it's family, especially if it's family, you have the right to speak up. You have the right to say no. You have the right to demand justice. Because I was a 72-year-old widow with a $15 dress and a bus pass. I had no power, no money, no influence. But I had truth, and I had courage. And that was enough to change everything. That's enough to change anything. Don't let anyone, not family, not circumstance, not shame, steal your voice. Use it, even if your hands shake, even if your heart pounds, even if everyone tells you to stay quiet. Use your voice. Tell your truth. Object to injustice wherever you find it. Because silence protects abusers. But truth? Truth sets everyone free. That's my story. That's why I objected at my son's wedding. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Now what about you? What injustice have you stayed silent about? What truth have you been too afraid to speak? I want to hear from you. Leave me a comment telling me your story, or just telling me you heard mine. Give this video a like if it moved you, if it changed something in how you think about family and loyalty and truth. And subscribe to this channel because I have many more stories to share with you. Stories of survival, of courage, of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when pushed to their limits. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, your voice matters. Use it.